It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth, financial literacy educator and speaker, entrepreneur, and chairman of the board of A Bank Information. Take charge of your financial future with your personal bank. Now here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to Your Personal Bank Show, and it's good to be with you today. We're going to cover a lot of great stuff like we usually do. Actually, I want to touch on a couple things real quick. I've kind of been having some fun and been honored. I had a gentleman the other day, been listening to the show for the last several months, and he paid me a great compliment. I thought it was awesome. He goes, you know, I've been to a lot of workshops, seminars. I've purchased a number of financial different packages and things like that. And he goes, there was a package I purchased from a workshop seminar thing I did prior to COVID. And he goes, you paid $8,000 for it. And he goes, in the last couple of months, just listening to your shows, I've already gotten more information out of your shows than that $8,000 program I paid for. He goes, I don't want to jinx what you're doing. I don't want you to start having to charge us, which I kind of laughed. But I said, no, I really appreciate that. That's awesome. Because really, that is my goal here. I understand that it's really about education. And one of the things I tell folks all the time when I do do workshops, like I said, when I used to do workshops, I should say, is, you know, first thing I'm going to tell you is, look, put away your checkbooks, that kind of thing. There's nothing for sale here. I'm going to recommend a couple books to read, of course, but outside of that, there's nothing to buy. There's no package to purchase or anything else. What I'm doing here, and I'm doing this on the radio, I'm doing the same thing I do with my workshops, and that is purely education. In fact, I've had some of the folks, you know, that groups that I spoke for, I remember they would say, well, don't you want to do an all-day workshop? Because I would usually do like a 3 to 4 hour half day. And I said, I assure you, by the end of the 3-4 hours, their brains are fried. I mean, I've given them enough information, because you and I both know that if you attend those kind of workshops, probably half of the content, if not more, is upselling to the bigger, better package, right? I don't have any of that. I'm here to educate people straight up. So it's pure information. And that's what I try to do with the radio show. And the reason I do that is really quite simple. See, I understand that most people I talk to, and I would venture to say that's pretty, based on the responses I've gotten from Money Radio listeners, it's the same thing. And that is, most people have not really been introduced or really looked at in any way, shape, or form the personal bank concept, and really looked at how it can enhance their financial future and make a tremendous difference. I've shared this story so many times where I'll be in a room with 100 investors, for example. This is at a workshop. This is on a Saturday typically. So these are folks that are serious about learning more about money. And I'll ask, how many of you are familiar with the insurance banking concept, your personal bank, whatever you want to call it? And I'll get 2 or 3 hands that'll raise, typically out of a group of 100, for example. That's common. So it's not a new idea. It's not a big secret like some people try to make it out to be. It's just not very commonly known by the average American, the average person. Again, this is a concept, a financial tool that's used very commonly with banks and financial boards and wealthy family offices and various things like that, those arenas. It's very common. But the general average public, it's just not brought to their attention. So here's the thing, this is my goal for the radio show, when I do a workshop or anything else for that matter. The goal is quite simple. The more I can educate you about how this financial tool works, I understand, the more likelihood you're going to actually do it and incorporate it in your life. So again, my goal is pure and simple. I want to teach you how this works. I want to educate you. I want to answer your questions. I want you to understand fully how this financial tool can work, how it can make a difference for you and your financial future. And when I do that, when I'm successful in accomplishing that, again, the vast majority of folks that I encounter and work with and talk to end up becoming clients, moving forward on this and all that type of stuff. So it's pretty exciting. Which kind of brings me to, in fact, the second thing I wanted to touch on was I was actually recently nominated for a financial visionary with a group called Global Finance. Now, when I first saw it, I was like, I wasn't very familiar with them. I was like, yeah, what is this? Turns out it's actually a pretty big deal. So I don't know. I've been nominated for this type thing. We'll see what happens. But it's kind of cool to be nominated for something like that. And it kind of came out of the blue. I wasn't expecting it. But what we are doing, for what, again, as I stated earlier, for most people, this is visionary. This is new and different for them. Again, it's not new and different for, the folks who have dealt with this before, the banks and the corporations, the family offices, but for the average American, it is. And what is this tool? Well, it's really quite simple. I've shared this so many times, but again, it's so simple. You're taking a high cash value insurance policy, one that's designed to grow cash, okay, maximize cash growth. We have companies, and I'll show you the charts. We have companies that have been paying 6% or more dividends for 25 years plus. They've never missed. They've paid dividends since before the Civil War, including the Great Depression and everything else in between. These are A+ rated, highly rated cash value dividend paying companies. These are companies designed to pay dividends. So when somebody says to me they're looking for an income or dividend type payer and they haven't looked at these options, frankly, in my opinion, they're doing themselves a disservice. Then, and by the way, when I say cash value insurance, high cash value insurance, some people stop listening because they're like, when they hear the term insurance, they misunderstand and they stop listening. I'm not talking about the type of insurance that most people are familiar with. Most people are familiar with death benefit protection, using it as a death benefit protection tool. And again, I've said this every time, there's nothing wrong with that. And if and when you have death benefit protection needs, you should address those. But that's not what I'm talking about here. That is not what we're dealing with. In fact, it's the complete opposite. There is a death benefit, but the purpose is to maximize cash. So again, think of a teeter-totter. You put cash on one side, death benefit on the other side. Most policies have maximized death benefit. We're doing the opposite, complete opposite. Flip it on a dime, as I tell people. Everything you know about insurance or probably aware about insurance, you need to throw out the window or completely reverse. Because again, we're trying to grow maximize cash growth. Like I said, we have dividend-paying companies that have paid 6% or more and still do today for over 25 years. I'll show you the charts. I'll show you the history. You'll see. And then the second step is we combine the bank line of credit. The bank line uses the cash in the policy as collateral for the loan. This works much like a HELOC or a home equity line of credit. In principle, it works the same way. The asset for a HELOC is the equity in the home. The asset here is the cash in the policy. It's a collateralized loan. It's super easy to qualify for. Gosh, the applications are super simple. The interest rates, though, that's what's so cool about it. It doesn't affect your loan-to-income ratio, any of these other kind of things. There's no loan fees. They don't charge you any interest, only when you use it. But the interest rates are in the 3s, depending on how much we're talking about. But, from 3 to 3.95 is the range, by the way. And I already told you the dividend payers are paying 6. And I say to people this all the time. Look, if your account's growing 6, your monies are growing 6, and you're getting credited 6, and you're getting charged 3 when you access it, what's your money doing? It's still growing. So my point is simple. Leave it there, get credited 6%, let it grow, and you can get it guaranteed. You can get it insured, tax-free. Those are benefits too. So that's, 6% consistently tax-free today. That's really strong. For folks that are looking for an ongoing, continuous, steady income, that's really strong, particularly today. But then when you add the other aspect to it, where you can access the funds and be in the 3s, so in other words, your positive arbitrage is between 2 and 3%. In other words, what did you do with that money? You spent it. You actually used the dollars. And that's what we're talking about more in the next segment, by the way, because you actually used the dollars. You spent the dollars. And you're still making 2-3% on those monies that you spent. Contact us at yourpersonalbank.com for more information on this. But I'm just going to tell you, this is the only financial tool that I've come across that you can actually earn interest on money that you've spent. And that, or allocated elsewhere, but that's the key difference. Stay tuned. In the next segment, we'll go into it further.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to Your Personal Bank Show, and I'll tell you what, we started off with some great stuff in terms of Well, like I said, I was being nominated for a global finance visionary award. That's kind of cool, but it was really neat to have one of my listeners say, share with me the value he's been getting from these shows. And like I said, that's what the goal is here. It's all about education, helping you understand more about your money, and most importantly, understand. Like, we do a lot of things. That's another thing I really want to touch on. I get when I speak, when I meet with folks in one-on-one situation. And by the way, if you contact us at yourpersonalbank.com, I'll be happy to meet with you. You'll be talking to me. And I know a lot of the times that's not the case, but that is true here. And the thing is, people get surprised when they say, well, you end up doing a lot of other things. There's other things we may recommend. I've been in the financial industry 22 years. We deal with a lot of different things. But the thing is, the personal bank concept, the focus on the show, and in most cases with folks, often is that because, again, as I stated in the first segment, I find it so rare that somebody's really been introduced to this concept or really looked at it. And then really, frankly, they're unaware of what it can do for them. And the biggest thing I tell people off the bat, right off the bat, is, the ability to earn monies consistently, steady, consistent with tax benefits. And then when you put the second aspect with the bank line of credit, where you can access the funds with a positive arbitrage scenario. So literally, you're actually earning money. See, this is the part that's mind-bending a bit, the paradigm shift in thinking about money, as I tell people, but it's the game changer. This is truly a game changer because the reality is, for most people, their number one, the studies have shown this over and over again, the number one concern, I should say, that folks have is running out of money in retirement. And this helps make your money last longer, go farther. You have more to spend. See, it's not just about rate of return. That's important, don't get me wrong. But when you spend money, when you actually expend the dollars, you use them for expenses or whatever it may be, well, in most cases, obviously, they're gone. You spent them, right? Here, when you spend the money, you actually pick up positive arbitrage because if you're, as I state all the time, if you're earning 6 and you're getting charged in the 3s, let's say between 3 and 4%, what's your money doing? It's growing. It's still making money. Because remember, you didn't withdraw the funds from the policy that's earning the 6%, getting credited 6%. What you're doing is you took the monies from the bank line of credit. Remember, the collateral for the bank line is the cash in the policy. But where do the dollars actually come from? A bank line of credit. So your dollars are still in the policy, still getting credited 6%. And the key is you're getting charged a lower rate than what you're earning. Like I said, currently, earning 6, long-term, 25-plus year history of paying 6% or more, over a 100-year history, never missing dividends, long-term dividend payers. But you're accessing the funds at a lower rate. Like I said, depending on the amount of money we're dealing with, we're looking at between 3 and 4% range. It's 3 to 3.95, just so you know. And the thing is simple. You're making 2 to 3% positive arbitrage on dollars you spent. Now, why is that so important? Well, I ask this question to folks all the time. If you just think about your normal everyday month-to-month expenses that we all have, food, clothing, housing, how much are you spending each year? How much are you spending each month? How much are you spending each year? Typical household in America, that's easily $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year just on the basics, right? If you think about that a minute, what if you could pick up 2 or 3% interest on that, say, $50,000 a year you spent? You know how much more money that would be in a decade or 2 or even more? Extra money in your pocket, accessible dollars you would have. Would that make your retirement dollars last longer? Would it go farther? Would you have more dollars to spend? The answer is yes. So you see my point, and it brings me to this other article, and I get frustrated by these. So I won't even say the title of the article because basically what they're talking about in the article is with low interest rate environment that we're in, and it's a common problem right now, is like, where do you find, for the person who's looking for income or looking for interest or dividends, where do you find a steady, solid dividend interest rate? And it's gotten a lot tougher with the Fed dropping interest rates where they are, basically next to zero. And they've come out and stated that they're planning to keep those rates through the end of 2022. Gosh, that's like 2.5 years from now. So it clearly looks obvious that we're going to have very low interest rate environment for the next 2.5 years, if not longer. Well, given that situation, this low interest rate environment, finding assets that generate income or interest or dividends certainly is more difficult. And that's the point of this article, which is completely accurate. I completely agree. That's a fact. But then their next point they tried to make was, well, that means that person really needs to get in the stock market because, quote unquote, it's the only game in town. And that's where I have problems with that statement. Because first of all, that's taking a very narrow view of the entire financial industry. And I see this very commonly, and it's very frustrating because it's not opening up somebody's ideas to other options. We can share one option that most people are familiar with. What about rental real estate? What if you had rental property? Can you create income that way? Now, I'm not saying rental real estate is for everybody, but I think we can all agree that that certainly is a well-known, tried and true income-generating asset. So stocks are not the only game in town when it comes to creating income. And you see my point where I'm coming from. And of course, the personal bank concept, dividend paying, high cash value policies wasn't even mentioned in this article, wasn't even considered. And that's where my beef is. That's my pet peeve. Because here's the thing, if you're trying to be an advisor or a media person trying to share advice and you make statements like this is the only game in town, there just isn't anything else out there. And there clearly is. I'm not saying everybody should do it, but what I am saying is you should at least consider it and look at it. Look at the option. And that's what this show is all about. That's what the education is all about. Because again, as I stated in the first segment, it's so very rare that I run into a situation or run into a person who has really looked at this and or done this concept. I've had a few, and I'll share those in the next segment. I'll talk about a couple examples of some folks that I've ran into very recently that have been using this concept, both clients of mine and otherwise, for long periods of time, very successfully. And the thing is, and they make the same statement. They'll say, yeah, I talked to my friends, and I spoke to a gal this morning, a lady who said, yeah, I paid my house off using the cash value of my policy, and my money's still growing. And when I share that with my friends, they kind of look at me like, I'm speaking in another language. They don't even realize that option is available. And in her case, like she said, it's worked out tremendously well. It's been an awesome solution for her. So like I said earlier, I'm not saying this is for absolutely everybody. I'm not. But I do believe anyone who is interested in looking at some steady consistency, maybe some downside protection, maybe some tax benefits, or they're looking to diversify, well, this is certainly an option that should be looked at and considered seriously. And like I said, contact us at yourpersonalbank.com. I'll be happy to share with you. I'm not going to sell you on something. I'm actually, when we meet one-on-one, it's very similar to here on the radio. I'm going to educate you. I'll ask you some specific questions about your situation, and then we'll start applying solutions to that, and I'll share with you why this would make some sense, why this makes a lot of sense in so many different cases. So stay tuned in the next segment. We'll talk about some more of those solutions.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. And like I said, we've been talking a lot about, folks looking for ways to generate income, dividends, interest, whatever that may be. And, with the low interest rate environments that we're in and appear to going to be in for quite some time going forward, like I said, the Federal Reserve has announced that they're going to keep these current interest rate environment around through at least the end of 2022, which puts us in a situation of, extremely low interest rates, It's great for borrowing. You know, if you're going to refi a property or you know, borrow car loans or any other of those kinds of things, the interest rates are historical lows and appear that they are going to continue to be that way for some time, well, next 2.5 years at least. So it also creates opportunities, but what it does also, I should say, it creates challenges for those that are trying to earn or live off of interest income or dividends or you know, cash flow. It really puts that person in a challenge. And this one article I was talking about that I read this week was really talking about that very issue. And it is true. It's to find something with a decent interest rate or dividend or crediting cash flow type rate is getting more and more difficult, and is going to continue that way for at least the next 2.5 years, it appears, if not longer, thanks to the Federal Reserve policy. So the reality is, what do you do? And the conclusion of this particular article, this is where I disagreed, and they were trying to say, well, therefore that person needs to move into the stock market because, quote unquote, that's the only game in town. And that's where my challenge comes in. I'm not saying the stock market's bad. Don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying somebody shouldn't have some assets there. But again, when we're talking about the person who's looking for cash flow, for interest, for dividends, you know, that's not necessarily it's not the only game in town. That's the facts. And so, as I stated earlier, one very commonly known solution to that is cash flow or long-term real estate, rental income, that type of thing. Now, again, that may not be the solution for everyone, but for those that do that, it's well known, will create a cash flow situation or can very well create a long-term cash flow situation. So again, the stock market is not the only game in town for earning those kinds of things. And it's those kinds of statements that it's almost like the horse with the blinders. You know, the person isn't willing or even to admit that there's anything else out there. That's where I have a problem. Now, of course, the cash flow, high cash value insurance, the personal bank concept, all that was not even mentioned. And when you have companies who have been paying 6% dividends for 25 years plus, never missed dividends since before the Civil War, don't you think that ought to be at least mentioned or considered? You know, that's where my beef comes. It's like, really? You got to be kidding me. So it's like, let's take a look at that because this is very real. In fact, I had a new client this week. I was showing him the charts of all the different companies. These are the top dividend-paying companies. We got a chart put together not by the insurance industry, but by actually a financial company who lends against these. In fact, by the way, this is something of interest. You know, when a bank is willing to use the cash in these policies as collateral, you know, the bank's putting their money on the line, aren't they? They look at these companies. They look at their ratings and their cash flow. They wanted to see the cash grow because, again, the cash in the policy is the collateral for the loan. And they look and analyze these closer than probably anyone else out there does. So they're putting their money on the line. That should mean something. So there's a list I have put together by one of these financial institutions. They've been doing this for the last 25 years. This is not public record. They've asked me not to share it publicly, like on Money Radio or my website. Now, I've honored that request. But individually, they say, yeah, if you talk to somebody individually, that's perfectly fine. So the first thing, if you contact us at yourpersonalbank.com, I'm actually going to show you, one of the first things we're going to do is show you this chart. And you'll see immediately which companies you want to work with. You'll also see, by the way, I work with most all of them, so it doesn't really matter to me. I'm agnostic. Doesn't make any difference, right? You'll immediately see companies that have been paying the 6% plus, like I told you, for the past 25 years and longer. So these companies, and so one of the comments was made by a gentleman this week. I was sharing, he goes, wow, I mean, I had no idea there were so many companies that have been doing this for so long. I said, yeah, don't let those articles like that tell you that the stock market is the only game in town or whatever. Don't let those articles fool you. There are literally billions of dollars each year that are contributed into these type of accounts by huge multi-billion-dollar companies. And they've been doing it for literally decades and decades, and in many cases, centuries, or over a century. I'll put it that way. he says, yeah, this is way bigger than I thought. I said, exactly. In fact, give you an idea, the second piece of it, the bank line of credit, one of the banks we work with and recommend, they have $1.8 billion. They told me this, $1.8 billion of these loans on the books. One bank. We've been doing it for like 25 years. This is not just, people poking a stick at it. This is not a new idea. It's not a big secret. It's been around for quite a while. It's been very effective for quite a while. And again, if you're looking for that consistency, steady. Hey, by the way, folks, we have index options. We actually have an option. It's funny. I've been sharing this a bunch with folks, and the index options based on the S&P 500. It's got a floor of 1% and a cap of 14. So what does that mean? It means you're going to make between 1 and 14% each year, depending on what the index does. Your downside is protected, which is nice. And so if the market makes 10%, you get 10. If it loses, you get 1. And if it goes up 15, you get 14. Okay? It's really that simple. Some people try to make it more complicated than that. It's not. It's that simple. And the average, by the way, I can show you, last 25 years, 8.52. Average annual rate of return. Gosh, that isn't bad. I think most people would agree if their average return over the last couple of decades or so had been 8.5 or was 8.5, I think most people would be pretty satisfied. The funny thing is, and then I show them the option of the 6%, consistent every year. It's funny how many people choose the 6. In other words, I give you the option. Again, I'm agnostic. It depends on your situation, which makes more sense for you. But it's funny, I find how often, and this follows psychology, human psychology, and all that. 6% is a bird in hand. The 8.5 is 2 in the bush, right? It may or may not happen. It did the last 25 years, but is it going to happen in the future? And this is basic human psychology. Some folks are going to choose that 8.5, take a shot and try to get something more. That's their personality, and that's fine. That's called risk tolerance. There's nothing wrong with that. But this really drives the point of what kind of personality are you? Or do you want to take the 6, locked in, it'll be there every year, consistent. The beauty is either one of those, you can still access the funds through the bank line of credit at 3 to 4%, 3 to 3.95. So if you did make the 8.5 in the index, for example, which has been the 25-year average, your positive arbitrage on that could be 4 or 5%. So what does that mean? When you actually took the money out and spent it, you could still pick up 4 or 5% positive interest gains on money you spent. Now, if what I just said just kind of blew your mind, I'm going to tell you need to contact yourpersonalbank.com. We'll discuss it. I'll share with you and show you how it works. It's very simple. But that's the paradigm shift in thinking. That's the game changer. That's what you need to understand is the difference. Because, folks, eventually, the money that you're putting away and investing and saving for the future, eventually, at some point, aren't you going to spend it or use it, or at least a part of it? What if you could actually earn some income or interest on the money you spent? That's what Your Personal Bank does, and that's why you need to contact us at yourpersonalbank.com to find out more. And as always, I always recommend stay tuned for the next segment, because we're going to discuss further a couple of other situations I've run into recently on this, how this can work for folks and dramatically enhance their financial future. Stay tuned.
For more information on Your Personal Bank, feel free to contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. Back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth.
All right, we're rounding third and we're wrapping things up today. I'll tell you what, we talked a lot about some really good stuff. Like I said, what we've really focused on today, I guess, is for that person that's looking for that interest, income, dividend, payer, whatever it may be, in this low interest rate environment. It's just getting tougher and tougher. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of good news going forward in terms of the low interest rate environment. In fact, if anything, it's going to get worse because of Federal Reserve policy. Federal Reserve has stated recently that they're going to keep the current low interest rate environment at least through the end of 2022. That gives us about 2.5 years, if not longer, of extremely low interest rate environment. In fact, the Fed rate is near zero. If they go any lower than where they are right now, we're talking about negative interest rates. And there's some talk about possibly even doing that. Of course, parts of Europe have done those kinds of things. Frankly, mixed results, I would say, is probably at best would be the best way to describe Europe's results in terms of a negative interest rate environment. From a personal standpoint, I hope our Federal Reserve doesn't go there. They've resisted. They haven't taken it off the table completely. By the way, if those of you who don't know, and if you heard from I'm chairman of the board of a bank in formation. So kind of putting my banker's hat on for a minute. It's just the information we're getting from, FDIC, Federal Reserve, things like that, from the banking industry. Most in the banking industry, people that I know, and these are, professionals in that industry, are pretty much unified in terms of there's real hope that they don't go to that negative environment. The thing is, bottom line is it just opens up a whole nother can of worms, if you know what I'm trying to say. This low rate interest rate environment we're in appears to be in place for a while. And frankly, we've been in a historically low interest rate environment since the end of 08-09. The 08-09 crisis, Fed dropped rates dramatically, some down to the levels they are now. They pretty much kept them there for about a decade. We're starting to creep up a bit, and of course, COVID hit, dropped them right back down. So we're about the 12th year now, in 11th or 12th year in a low, much lower than average interest rate environment. Interest-bearing investments, dividend-paying assets, cash flow type of assets are very interest rate sensitive. Bonds come to mind, for example. And with a long-term low interest rate environment, it depresses the returns. It lowers the returns on the interest rate that they're paying. And that's where, again, the person who's wanting to live off of their money, and for retirement, those types of things, or want to have a safer bucket. Even modern portfolio theory teaches and has, since the 50s, a 60-40 split in stocks and bonds is recommended. That can be adjusted depending on somebody's situation, and of course their their situation, their financial life situation. And it also recommends, by the way, as a person nears or gets into retirement, that ratio should be closer to 50-50. Well, gosh, if 30, 40, 50% of somebody's assets, their portfolio, is supposed to be in bonds or cash flow type of assets, and the interest rates are depressing the returns because they're so low, where do you turn? And like I said, many articles talk about, well, maybe you should take on more risk, which is kind of counterproductive, or it's counterintuitive. This is a person who's maybe nearing retirement or in retirement, wanting to live off of some of their assets and wants to have some consistency. Again, your personal bank fits that situation tremendously well. And my frustration I run into all the time is it's so little talked about. And that's what the show is all about, is to get the information out there, to educate people and say, hey, folks, guess what? There's another option. And it's an option you've probably never considered or never looked into. In most cases, that's what I find. But in the cases where I find where folks did and have and use it, as I spoke earlier, previous segment, I've got a lady who's retired, but she paid her house off using the cash in her policy. And her money's still growing. So she paid off her house. She's retired now. And her money's still growing. Here's the thing. Again, the cash grows in the policy. You access it through a bank line of credit, and you get the positive arbitrage. You still grow or earn the difference. Where else have you found, or have you run into a situation where you could say pay off a house or pay off any other bill for that matter, whether it be a car loan or a student loan or a credit card or any other expense? Or what about just regular monthly expenses? We all have food, housing, clothing expenses, right? Okay. Your monthly bills. What if you could pay off your monthly bills or pay off debt and still earn interest on that money that you spent? if you understand the other aspect, compound interest, do you realize how much, a lot of people say, it's only 2 or 3%. Well, if you understand compound interest, an extra 2 or 3% over time adds up. And again, remember, this is on money you spent. You don't have it earning for you on anywhere else. You spent it on bills, or you paid off your house, or you see what I'm saying? That's money you took out of your pocket, out of your control, and gave to someone else to pay off a bill or pay off an expense. So it's not like you're going to be earning anything on it anyway. Those dollars are gone. You spent them, right? What's the return on those dollars? 0. Nada. Nothing. You spent them. They're gone. So the point is, this isn't an either-or situation. Should I invest in the market, or invest in this, or invest in that, or do the personal bank? No, you're spending these monies anyway. You should do what you're doing if it's working, and do this also. This is an and, not an or situation. It's not this or that. This is do what you're doing and this. And I can show you how to enhance your returns on your investments too, by the way. But even if you just focus on this part, what if you allocated dollars that you were spending through the personal bank, accessed them through the bank line of credit, and picked up 2 or 3% interest? Let's say your annual expenses are $50,000 a year. What would that do? Over time, you'd have more money to spend. Because if you spent that $50,000 a year on expenses, we're going to get anything out of it. We're going to earn anything from those dollars. And the answer is obvious. No. So anything you earn through the personal bank in terms of positive arbitrage on dollars you spent is gravy. It's icing on the cake. It's extra dollars you wouldn't have had any other way, basically. You see the difference? What I'm talking about here is adding more money to your pocket, having more dollars to spend than you already do now. And I'm not talking, in most cases, when I'm working with somebody, we make very little changes on investments and investment strategies in what they're doing, particularly if those investments are working. I always say this to folks. Look, if you've got something that's working, I don't care what it is, but if it's working for you, by all means, keep doing it. The only thing I'm going to encourage you to do and recommend you do is add one step to the process to pick up positive arbitrage. Because guess what's going to happen? At some point in the future, those dollars are going to be spent. You're going to use those dollars for some purpose, right? In most cases. By the way, if you keep them, if you flow them through the personal bank and then reinvest back into the same investment, you can still pick up that 2 or 3% extra. So I have a lot of folks doing that too. But we all spend money. We all have expenses. And I'm talking about showing you how to earn some interest on those dollars. Contact us at yourpersonalbank.com for more information. I'd love to talk to you and share with you how this would work for you. And as always, stay tuned to the Your Personal Bank Show on Money Radio, 1510 AM or 105.3 FM. We are on Tuesdays at noon and Thursdays at 1. We'll see you next week.
Listen Tuesday at noon and Thursdays at 1 for more information on Your Personal Bank. Contact Ference at yourpersonalbank.com. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guest on this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Products and riders may have limitations and may not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Compare when considering a replacement. Dividend rates and bank line of credit rates may charge. Contact yourpersonalbank.com for current rates.